Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. It's me again, it's Grace Opare, and thank you so much for stopping by. Please remember to subscribe to the channel, hit on the like button and share so that other people come to know about it. Okay, today I come your way with another exciting and informative video, right? Okay, now this video is particularly meant for people with family, married people, whereby one of you have secured an admission to study in Canada, and then you are preparing to submit your visa application. Right now, one of the questions that really bothers married couple when one of them has secured an admission to study abroad has to do with, do I go with my spouse or do I leave my spouse behind? On what type of visa do I go with my spouse? What is the way forward for us as a family? Now, in this video, I am going to help you answer some of these questions. I am not going to take a decision for you, but I'm going to give you all the scenarios, all the different ways that you can choose, the different pathways that you can choose. Then I'm going to give you some of the key things that you need to consider when making the decision in whether your spouse should accompany you or not. Okay, so the first thing you need to know that in Canada especially, I know other countries also do it, but in Canada, international students are allowed to come and study in Canada with their family, your spouse and your children, right? But when it comes to your spouse, there are two ways, or there are two types of visas that you can apply for your spouse to come with you. You can either apply for your spouse to come as a visitor, so the normal visitor's visa, or you can apply for your spouse to come on an OpenWork spousal visitor visa. Now, the difference between the visitor's visa and the spousal work permit visa is that when your spouse comes to Canada on a visitor's visa, he only comes to spend a limited time with you. With the visitor's visa, he or she is only allowed to come to Canada and stay for a period of 6 months, after which he needs to go back to your home country, right? And on the visitor's visa, your spouse is not allowed or will not be allowed to work. But on the OpenWork spousal visa, your spouse can come and stay with you for as long as the period of your study. If it is 1 year, your spouse can stay with you for that 1 year. If it is 2 years, your spouse can stay with you for that 2 years. And then on the OpenWork spousal permit visa, your spouse is allowed to work legally in Canada. No restrictions on how long he or she can stay. You are wondering, should my spouse accompany me to Canada whilst I'm coming to study, or should I leave him or her behind? Should I apply for the visitor's visa for my spouse, or should I apply for the spousal open work permit visa, right? So these are some of the things you may want, or you are probably deliberating on. Now, in both ways, you are allowed to do so. But before you take the decision on whether to go for the visitor's visa or to go for the open work permit visa, there are three key things you need to consider. One, you need to consider the duration of your stay. Okay, the duration of the stay of your spouse. Now, if you are coming in as a student, it's either you are coming in for a 1 year study program or a 2 year study program. So you as a student, your stay is fixed, either 1 year or 2 years. Now, the question you should be asking yourself is that when my spouse comes with me, how long is my spouse going to stay? Is he just coming in to stay for some few weeks, some few months and go back? Or is my spouse coming in to stay with me permanently for the 1 year or the 2 years of my studies here in Canada? Is my spouse going to leave his work and everything back at your home, back in Ghana, and then accompany me to Canada, try and build a life for him or herself or for the entire family here? Or my spouse is not going to leave his work behind. Rather, he or she will still be working in Ghana or in Nigeria, and then he'll be coming here to visit us. Now, If you answer any of these questions, if your answer is such that your spouse doesn't need to move to Canada permanently to stay and to work, but will just be coming in to visit you once in a while and then go back home, then probably you should be considering applying for the visitor's visa for your spouse. If on the other way around, as a family, you are thinking that probably your spouse should move in with you, come and stay permanently in Canada with you during your period of stay, then you should probably be thinking about the open work permit type of visa, right? So the question you need to be asking and be answering yourself is, how long will my partner be staying when he or she accompanies me to Canada? The answers to these questions will help you to know whether you should apply for the open work permit for your spouse or just the regular visitor's visa for your spouse. Now, another thing you should take into consideration when you are making this decision is your proof of funds, right? Do we have enough money to prove our funds during our visa application? I have already done a video on how you can calculate your proof of funds. I'm going to link that video to this video. I'll put the link to that video in the description box so you can watch it and then you see how you can calculate your proof of funds. Now, it is important that during your visa application, you are able to prove to the visa officer that you have enough funds to take care of yourself as a family. If you are coming in as a student, you need to deal with your own living expenses, your tuition fee, and then your flight. If you are coming in with your spouse on the open work permit visa, your spouse, because he or she will be coming in to stay for the same period as you are coming in, he or she is also expected to prove funds of 4,000 Canadian dollars. So the question you should be asking yourself is that if you are applying for the open work permit visa for your spouse, in addition to yours, does the two of you have enough funds in your account to prove to the visa officer that when both of you, your visas are granted, you are capable of taking care of yourselves when you come together to Canada? You understand? If you are applying on the open work permit visa, there is an expectation of how much you should prove as funds for your spouse. On the other hand, if you are applying for a visitor's visa for your spouse, there is no expectation or limitation on the amount of money that your spouse should have. Rather, you should just be able to prove that when you come to Canada, you can afford your flight and probably some little living expenses. There is no threshold that your spouse should have this amount of money in his or her account as living expenses. So you should be asking yourself, if I apply for the open work permit for my spouse, do we have the necessary funds to prove to the visa officer that we can take care of ourselves here in Canada or not? The answer you provide to this question should also inform your decision on the type of visa you should apply for your spouse, right? The third thing you should also take into consideration is your home ties. Although a federal court in Canada has ruled that proof of home ties cannot be used as a basis to deny somebody his or her study permit visa application, you should also note that in your visa application, you should be able to convince the visa officer that you have things back at home and that you return to your home country after your studies. So you sit down as a family and then you ask yourself, if I'm traveling together with my spouse, what are the things we are going to use as our home ties? Now, on the other hand, if you apply for a visitor's visa for your spouse, you can go ahead and use your spouse as your home ties. The reason is that with a visitor's visa, your spouse is not moving in with you to come and stay permanently in Canada during your period of stay. Rather, your spouse is just getting the visa to allow him come and visit you and go back. So when you apply for the visitor's visa for your spouse, You can also use your spouse as your home ties. Now, in summary, all what I'm trying to say is that when you are preparing to come to Canada as a student with a family, you are permitted to come with your spouse, okay? Now, there are two types of visas you can apply for your spouse. You can either apply for the open work permit for your spouse or for the visitor's visa for your spouse. The advantage is that when your spouse comes to Canada with the open work permit, he or she is allowed to stay for the period of your stay, either 1 or 2 years of your program, and then he or she is also allowed to work permanently and legally within that 2-year period. On the other hand, if your spouse comes in with a visitor's visa, he can only stay for a period of 1 to 6 months, and then he'll have to go back. But he can come in any time that he feels like coming in to visit you. And your spouse will not be allowed to stay to work on the visitor's visa. However, if you are applying for the open work permit visa for your spouse, then you should be able to prove that you have enough funds in your account and that you have things you can use to show as your home ties. If you're applying for the visitor's visa, you don't need to show much proof of funds, and you can equally use your spouse as your home ties. So these are the options. You weigh the two options, you sit down as a family, you deliberate on it, you think about it, and then you make the best decision for yourself as a family, right? The last thing that I want to share with you is that if you apply for the visitor's visa for your spouse, and your spouse comes into Canada with a visitor's visa to visit you, he or she has the opportunity to change the visitor's visa into an open work permit visa. Do you get that? So you may not apply for the open work permit visa for your spouse right from the onset, but with the visitor's visa, when your spouse arrives in Canada, he can use the visitor's visa to apply for an open work permit visa. That will allow him or her to stay in Canada for the period of your stay, and also to work permanent, and also to work in Canada. Okay, so these are the two options. Think about it, deliberate on it, and you make a decision as a family. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.